I used to believe that my dad was my biggest supporter. I was his only child, and for the longest time, it was just the two of us, me and him against the world. My mom passed away when I was 8, and from that moment on, my dad promised me he'd always be there, no matter what. I clung to those words like a life raft. We lived in a modest two-bedroom house just outside of Portland. Nothing extravagant, but it was warm, familiar, safe. My room had faded posters on the walls and a dented desk by the window where I'd done all my homework since middle school. My dad's cologne would linger in the hallway, and on Sunday mornings, he always made pancakes. No matter how hard the week had been, we always had those pancakes. When I turned 19, he started dating again. I remember pretending to be okay with it, forcing a smile when he told me about Sandra. She worked at the local bank and, according to him, wasn't like other women. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but the way his eyes lit up made me swallow my doubts. I wanted him to be happy. He deserved that. At first, Sandra seemed nice enough. Polite. Sweet. She brought over lasagna the first night she visited and complimented our furniture, even though it was old. But there was something in her eyes I couldn't read. Something that felt off. Not fake, exactly, but cold. Calculated. The first time I noticed something strange, it was almost nothing. I came home from class one day and found my favorite mug, one my mom had given me before she passed, moved from the shelf and shoved into the back of the cabinet. It was just a mug, right? People move things. I let it go. But then there was the time she reorganized the entire kitchen without telling me. I came downstairs to make tea and couldn't find anything. When I asked her about it, she laughed lightly and said, "Just trying to make this place feel more efficient." Not homey, not comfortable, efficient. Still, I tried to be understanding. I didn't want to be that jealous daughter clinging to the past. Maybe I was just being territorial. Maybe it was my problem. So I stayed quiet. A week later, Sandra officially moved in. Dad didn't talk to me about it beforehand. One day, I just came home, and her suitcases were in the hallway. That night, she took my mom's side of the bed and didn't even hesitate. I stood at the doorway for a second too long, watching her fluff the pillows that still smelled faintly like lavender. My dad caught my eye and smiled awkwardly, like he knew, but didn't know what to say. I forced a smile back and went to my room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to muffled laughter from their room. I told myself to grow up. He deserved to be happy. But still, something felt wrong. Then came the family dinner. My dad invited my aunt and uncle over to celebrate the new chapter. Sandra made chicken piccata and set the table perfectly, like she'd been practicing. She smiled too much, asked too many questions about the house and our finances. She laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. But it was what happened after dinner that stuck with me. I walked into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water and caught the end of a whispered conversation between her and my aunt. "She'll move out eventually," Sandra murmured. "She's in college. It's just a matter of time." My heart dropped. She wasn't talking about some random roommate. She was talking about me. I backed away before they noticed me and went straight to my room, sitting on the edge of my bed, gripping the bottle until my knuckles turned white. She wanted me gone. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe I misheard. Maybe she meant something else. But the uneasiness in my chest wouldn't go away. The next day, my dad asked if I'd thought about getting a place closer to campus. Just a coincidence, right? When I asked him where that idea came from, he looked confused, as if he didn't even remember the conversation. "Just thought it might be easier for you," he said. "Less commuting. More independence." Independence. That word echoed in my head like a bell. And that's when it hit me. My place in this house was shrinking. Quietly. Subtly. Like a light dimming without anyone noticing. I tried to brush it off again. Told myself I was overthinking. But that night, I found a list on the fridge. Sandra's handwriting. At the bottom, in neat cursive, it read, "Guest room, clean out for guests." The guest room was my room. My room. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake wondering how things had changed so fast. How my dad had once kissed my forehead and told me he'd always protect me, and now he was letting someone else erase me. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to know if this was all in my head or if I was being slowly pushed out of my own home. I started keeping a journal, not because I was sentimental, but because I needed to keep track. My memory was beginning to feel like a trick mirror. One day something would seem fine, the next it would feel warped and unfamiliar. I didn't trust my instincts anymore. I had to write it down. Every odd glance, every passive-aggressive comment, every shift in energy. It began subtly, like how Sandra started forgetting to make a second portion of dinner. She'd cook enough for two, and then act surprised when I came into the kitchen. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be home," she'd say with a painted-on smile. I was always home. I had classes 3 days a week, part-time work the other 2. I'd been on the same schedule since the semester started. She knew that, or the time she reprogrammed the thermostat. Suddenly, the heat was lower and my room, which was farthest from the furnace, felt like a freezer. When I mentioned it, she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, I thought you liked it cool." Every interaction had a double edge. Harmless on the surface, but sharp beneath. At first, I thought maybe she didn't know how it came across. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then I started catching her watching me. Not casually, but deliberately. Observing. Measuring. One afternoon, I came home early and found her in my room. My heart stopped for a second. She jumped when she saw me. "I was just looking for a charger," she stammered. My charger was on my nightstand. Everything else looked untouched, but still, something felt violated. I told my dad about it later. Tried to keep my voice light. "Hey, I caught Sandra in my room today. Said she was looking for a charger. Just kinda weird." He frowned, but not at the situation. At me. "You don't have to be so defensive all the time," he said. "Sandra's trying. Can you try too?" I wanted to scream. Trying? She was invading my space. Undermining me. But he didn't see it. He saw love. New beginnings. A fresh start. I was the leftover from his old life. Then came the bank incident. I had a small savings account, money for my part-time job, and a bit of what my mom had left behind. Not much, but enough to make me feel safe. I went to check my balance one day and noticed 2 withdrawals I didn't make. Not huge, but noticeable. One was for groceries, the other a beauty store. I asked Dad if maybe he'd accidentally used my card. He looked genuinely confused. Then I remembered Sandra worked at a bank. My bank. I froze. Was it possible? No. That would be insane, wouldn't it? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Instead, I started watching her the way she watched me. She was meticulous. Polished. Everything about her was curated. How she spoke, what she wore, how she played the role of the supportive partner. But there were cracks. I noticed how she always brought up the idea of me moving out in subtle ways. "You'll love the independence. You're old enough to build your own place now. It must be hard living with your dad while you're in college." She never said it directly, but it was constant. And then one night, I overheard something that cemented everything. I was in the hallway, returning from the bathroom, when I heard them in the living room. Sandra and Dad. They were watching TV, but the volume was low, and they were whispering. "I just think she needs to grow up," Sandra said. "You've coddled her too long." "She's still in school," Dad replied, unsure. "She's got a lot going on." "I know, but we can't keep waiting forever. I love you, and I want this to feel like our home. Not like we're living in someone else's memory." Silence. And then Dad sighed. "Maybe you're right." My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd pass out. I turned and crept back to my room, every step heavy with betrayal. My room, my space, felt smaller than ever. They were planning to erase me. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the cracks in the plaster suddenly resembling fault lines. Everything was about to shift. Over the next few days, Sandra started changing the house more aggressively. My mom's photo was taken off the mantel. My blanket disappeared from the couch. Little things vanished. My presence being scrubbed, piece by piece. Even my dad started acting differently. Distant. Short-tempered. Like I was an inconvenience. One morning, I overheard him on the phone. "She's not adjusting well. I don't know. Maybe it's time we had a real talk." A real talk. My heart pounded. That night, I checked the drawer where I kept the backup key to my lockbox. It was empty. Gone. I wanted to scream, to confront them both, but I needed proof. Cold, hard proof. So I waited. I stayed quiet, pretended to ignore the coldness, the silence, the way Sandra smiled like she already owned everything. But inside, I was a storm. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Something was happening. Something calculated. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. It happened on a Friday night. I was supposed to be at work until 10, but a sudden power outage shut down the building around 6:30. Most people left right away, but I lingered outside for a bit, hesitant to go home. Something in me, some gut instinct told me not to go straight in. When I got home, I used my key as quietly as I could and stepped inside like a ghost. The house was dim, lit only by the warm glow of a lamp in the living room. I heard voices. Muffled. Intimate. I froze in place. It was Sandra and my dad. "She's not even grateful for everything we've done," Sandra said. Her voice was hushed, venomous. "You let her live here, eat here, take up space, and all she does is glare at me like I'm the enemy." There was a pause. "She's my daughter," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I can't just abandon her." "But she's not a child anymore," Sandra replied. "You have to make a choice. Either we build a future together, or you keep dragging this ghost from your past into every moment we have." I stood in the hallway, heart racing. My breath caught in my throat. But then, Sandra kept speaking. And her next words sliced deeper than anything before. "You know what would help?" she said. "If we had access to that college fund her mom left. It's just sitting there in that lockbox. She doesn't even use it. It could help us move forward." My blood turned cold. That money, that small savings account, and the envelope in my lockbox was from my mom. The last thing she ever gave me. Something meant to protect me. And now this woman, this calculating stranger who had crawled into our lives, wanted to take it? "I don't know," Dad mumbled. "We're building a life, Aaron," she whispered, her tone syrupy and persuasive. "She'll be fine. She needs to grow up. She doesn't have to know it was us." Us. They were in it together. That word snapped something in me. All the questions I'd been carrying, the doubts, the gaslighting, the half-truths, it all came together in a horrifying mosaic of betrayal. I couldn't stay hidden anymore. I stepped into the living room, and their heads whipped toward me like they'd seen a ghost. Sandra's face dropped, but only for a second. Then it snapped into place with that same practiced calm. "Oh. I didn't hear you come in." Dad stood quickly, guilt painted all over his face. "I got off early," I said coldly. None of us spoke for a few seconds. The tension in the room felt electric. I turned to Dad. "So, is it true? You're thinking about taking Mom's money? The money she left for me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Sandra like he needed her permission to speak. And in that moment I knew everything. I wasn't his priority. I was his inconvenience, his burden, his regret. Sandra stood up, gently touching Dad's arm like she was steadying a child. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I snapped. My voice shook with fury. "Don't play innocent now. I heard everything." Dad finally spoke. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "No, it's not," I said, my throat tightening. "She manipulated you. And you let her." Sandra tried to interject. "This house, this life, it's not just yours anymore. You need to understand that." "I've never been allowed to forget it," I said, my voice sharp. "Since the day you moved in, you've been erasing me. First my mom's photo, then my space, and now you want to take what little she left behind." "I just wanted us to have a fresh start," Sandra said, voice dripping with false concern. I laughed bitterly. "No. You wanted to replace me. And Dad? You let her." My father's face crumbled then. He sat back down slowly, head in his hands. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Not this time. I walked down the hall, into my room, locked the door, and fell to my knees. I shook as I opened my lockbox. It was empty. The envelope. The letter.
The check. Gone.
Tears spilled down my face as the realization sank in. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. From my future. From my past. From my mother. My dad had let this woman rip away the last piece of my foundation. I collapsed onto the bed and screamed into the pillow. It was the first time I truly felt alone. Abandoned. But somewhere in that darkness, a strange kind of clarity emerged. This wasn't over. They thought they'd taken everything. But they didn't know me. And they didn't know what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. I wasn't going to let this go. Not quietly. Not ever. The next morning, I didn't come out of my room. I didn't eat. Didn't speak. Didn't sleep. But I was wide awake. Somewhere between heartbreak and fury, I found a frightening calm. Like the kind of silence before a storm you know will change the landscape forever. Around noon, my dad knocked on the door. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Another knock. Softer this time. "I never meant to hurt you, sweetheart." That word again. Sweetheart. He didn't get to use that anymore. I opened the door slowly, and he stepped back when he saw my face. Puffy eyes, hollow cheeks, and that cold stare I'd never worn before. "Sit down," I said. He hesitated but obeyed. He looked like a child who knew he was caught. I sat across from him, silent for a moment, letting him sweat, letting the weight of everything hang in the room. Then I asked calmly, "Did you take the envelope?" "From the lockbox." He rubbed his hands together. "Sandra said." "No," I interrupted. "Don't tell me what Sandra said. I want to know what you did." His lips parted, but nothing came out. The silence was louder than any confession. "That money was for Mom," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "The last thing she ever left me. You knew that. And you gave it to her. For what? A vacation? A down payment on her dreams. She said you didn't even want to go to college," he finally said. I blinked, stunned. "So that justifies stealing it?" "She convinced me you'd never use it, that it was just sitting there, wasted." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "So you let her rob me, your own daughter, for convenience?" "I just wanted peace in this house," he burst out, suddenly angry. "You two never got along. Everything was tense. I didn't know what else to do." "So you picked her," I whispered. He didn't deny it. That was the moment everything in me shattered into something else. Not sadness. Not even rage. Resolve. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said. "It's not even the money. It's the fact that when push came to shove, you chose her. You chose her lies, her manipulation, her comfort, over your own blood." He looked down, ashamed. I leaned forward. "You know why we never got along? Because I saw through her from day one. I saw what you refused to see. She wanted you to erase your past, so she could control your future." "You're being dramatic," he started. "Am I?" I hissed. "She moved in and tried to scrub this house clean of Mom's memory. She made you throw out her clothes, her letters, even the photo albums. You called it moving on. I call it betrayal. She helped me heal. She helped you forget." He stood, frustrated, trying to regain some control. "You're twisting this." "No," I said firmly. "I'm just finally telling the truth out loud." That's when Sandra walked in. Like clockwork. Right when it got messy. She stood at the doorway with a fake look of concern. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said. "It's not." My voice was ice. Sandra looked at my dad, then back at me. "I know things got misinterpreted last night, but we can fix this." I stood slowly. "You mean you can fix this? Like you fixed my dad? Like you fixed our family?" Her face twitched. A crack in the mask. "You don't understand," she said. "No," I snapped. "You don't. You walked into our grief and saw opportunity. You played the part of the caring partner until you got control. Then you erased my mom like she never existed. She stepped into the room. Your father is happy now. We have stability. A future. At what cost? I shouted. You stole from me. She raised her eyebrows, feigning innocence. There's no proof I did anything. My jaw clenched. I heard you, Sandra. I heard everything. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she dropped the act.
Fine.
So what? You're grown. That money would have just been wasted on some art degree or therapy sessions you wouldn't commit to. My father gasped. Sandra. No, she said, waving him off. She needs to hear it. She's been living in some fantasy where she's a victim. Maybe now she'll finally grow up. You think you've won, don't you? I said, stepping toward her. You think you've taken everything. She smiled, smug and poisonous. I don't think I know. Then I smiled too. Then you're dumber than I thought. Because I had a backup plan. Something I had never told anyone. A journal. Letters from my mom. A scanned copy of the original savings account with her handwriting and signature. And most importantly, a recording app on my phone. It had captured everything from the night before. Every word. I held up my phone slowly. Sandra's face dropped. You. Yeah, I said. I know. Dad stared at the phone like it was a bomb. And in many ways it was. I'm sending it to a lawyer, I said coldly. You accessed a fund that wasn't yours. You conspired to steal money, left to me in a legal document. That's called fraud. And there is proof now. She lunged for me, but I stepped back. Dad grabbed her arm.
Sandra.
Stop. She looked at him, betrayed. You're going to let her do this to me? I'm going to let her do what's right, he said quietly. It was the first time he stood up to her. Too little, too late. She stormed out of the room, her heels pounding down the hallway like war drums. I turned to my father, tears stinging my eyes again. You should have protected me. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Smaller. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, I whispered. You let her destroy something sacred. And then I walked past him. As I reached the door, I stopped. You lost me the moment you handed her the key to my mother's memory. And I walked out. Not just from the room. From that life. That house.
That lie.
I didn't go back. Not to that house. Not to the town. Not even for holidays. I packed a single bag, walked out that front door, and never looked back. It was raining that day. I remember the sound of it hitting the pavement like a slow applause, like the universe was saying, finally.
You did it.
For a while, I lived in silence. Stayed with a friend in the city, kept my phone off, read old letters from my mom when the nights got too heavy. I sent the audio recording and scanned documents to a lawyer. A woman named Eliza, who said one sentence that stayed with me. You've got more power than you think. Within a few weeks, the legal process started. Sandra was served.
Fraud.
Misappropriation of funds. Civil theft. And once the story got out, the fallout came quickly. Her reputation, tarnished. Her job, gone. Her marriage, crumbling. And my dad? He tried to reach out. Emails. Messages. Voicemails that grew more desperate with every day. But I didn't answer. Because it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about self-respect. And boundaries. And honoring the girl I used to be. The one who begged for love in a house full of ghosts. But karma has a rhythm. And it doesn't skip a beat. It didn't take long before I heard what happened. Sandra had drained more than just my college fund. She'd been siphoning money from one of my dad's joint accounts too, slowly, subtly. He didn't realize until he tried to buy a new car, and his card was declined. She left him. Vanished overnight with what little she had left. No goodbye. No warning. Just gone. He was left with overdraft notices, a mountain of debt, and a silence that echoed through every room of that too-large house. He sold it 6 months later. Moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Alone. When I found out, I didn't feel joy. I felt justice. There's a difference. I got into college, after all. Different school. Different path. But it was mine. And I paid for it with a settlement from the lawsuit. Not hush money. Honor money. Money that made things right. I studied psychology. Funny, right? The girl gaslit and betrayed by her own blood went on to understand the human mind. Maybe I was trying to understand him, or her, or myself. But one day it happened. I saw him again. 3 years later. I was at the library cafe, tutoring a freshman. I looked up, and there he was, older, thinner, holding a paper coffee cup with trembling fingers. Our eyes met. He froze.
So did I.
He took a few steps forward, cautiously, like I was a deer that might bolt. "Hi," he said softly. I blinked. "Hi." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look good. Really good." I nodded once. "Thanks. I heard you're in school." "Yep." Silence. Then he said it. "I'm sorry. For everything." I believed him this time, but I also knew some things can't be undone. So I just said, "I know." He asked if we could talk. Just 5 minutes. I said okay. We walked outside. He told me everything, how Sandra drained him emotionally and financially, how he replayed every moment and saw it differently now, how he hated himself. I listened, and then he said something that surprised me. "I still love you. I always have. I was weak." That hit harder than anything else, because I realized he wasn't evil. He wasn't heartless. He was human.
Flawed.
Fragile. Frightened. And I couldn't hate him anymore. But that didn't mean I could let him in. "I forgive you," I said gently. "But that doesn't mean I forget." He nodded, eyes wet. "I understand." And then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. A necklace. Simple.
Gold.
A small pendant shaped like a key. "She gave it to me before she died," he said. "Said it was for you when you were old enough." I forgot. Or maybe I avoided it. But it's yours now. I took it with trembling hands. Opened the pendant. Inside was a picture of me and my mom, pressed together cheek to cheek, both smiling like we knew a secret the world didn't. A wave of emotion crashed over me. "Thank you," I whispered. He walked away after that. And I never saw him again. But the story doesn't end there. Because one night in my dorm room, I opened the back of the pendant again. This time, something slipped out. A folded piece of paper. Tucked so tightly I hadn't noticed it. I opened it slowly. It was in her handwriting. "No matter how dark it gets, you have your own light.
Trust it.
Follow it. And never forget, I loved you first." I cried until I fell asleep clutching that pendant. And when I woke up, I wasn't broken anymore. I was rebuilt. Not the same girl I used to be, but someone stronger. Someone whole. And even now, years later, I still wear that pendant. Not because I need to remember the pain, but because I need to remember who I became because of it. And every now and then, when I walk past a mirror and catch my own reflection, I smile. Because I didn't just survive. I rose. And that's the kind of ending Sandra will never understand. Because karma doesn't always hit like thunder. Sometimes, it whispers through the cracks and rebuilds you in silence. Stronger, wiser, and untouchable.